Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the owner and founder of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and this is a channel where we provide free personal development tips and tools for the subconscious mind. So today, I really want to talk a little bit about the dismissive avoidant attachment style and childhood emotional neglect. So this is a really important topic, and I think this is most important because it's something that can be so unseen and unrecognized, and it's something that can traumatize and destabilize our nervous system as much as anything. But oftentimes, emotional neglect can sort of be this covert happening. So a lot of clients that I'll see went through really intense periods of childhood emotional neglect, but the problem was that, their parents were meeting all their material needs and, meeting all of their, put them in great schools or made sure they were well educated or, tutors and after school sports and all these different things. And yet when a child, cried or, needed to be really vulnerable or just needed some kind of like comforting or validation or to have like a supportive conversation, often these things were sort of missing in action. And so that child learned that, okay, I can have physical needs that are met and I can connect in that way. I can connect mentally and, intellectually, but any form of emotional need is sort of dismissed or there's just no availability for it to be seen, heard, or understood. And this can be extremely traumatizing because a lot of times this child will sort of look at a caregiver and be like, okay, well, I have this need, it's so unmet, and they'll form the subconscious self-interpretation that, okay, it's just something wrong with them or their emotions are bad or wrong, and they'll just reject their own emotions as a result of this. So what I really want to talk about specific to this video, because emotional neglect can happen in different formats across the attachment styles, but for the dismissive avoidant attachment style, emotional neglect tends to be something that's sort of pervasive. So something that's there, for the majority of the time. The anxious attachment style tends to have like periods of emotional neglect, or emotional neglect more so relative to what their expectations are and what they're accustomed to when they're not able to self-soothe. And the fearful avoidant tends to have sort of like this one-way emotional neglect, more like enmeshment trauma type situation. So those things still do exist for the other attachment styles, but not in the same like all pervasive way, where it's sort of a consistent that there is a, primary caregiver or, both parents even are emotionally unavailable and don't provide the emotional support that the child needs. Now, this, emotional neglect or childhood neglect can also take place in the form of like literally neglect of your physical and safety needs. But for the sake of this video, because it's most, popular and most prominent really, is that emotional neglect is what really takes place, and it's something that's often going unrecognized. So with that being said, some of the symptoms or the impact of this childhood emotional neglect is that often the dismissive avoidant will feel self-doubt in a lot of situations. Not all, but in general, they will tend to withdraw whenever they feel a lot of self-doubt. And self-doubt and deep-rooted insecurity, like not a strong sense of self-belief, will be something that happens fairly often, and more often than not, in interpersonal relationships. They will also have this deep sort of assumed rejection that will be like very, very subconscious, but they'll sort of enter into relationships, closeness, situations that demand a certain level of vulnerability, assuming that they're going to be rejected at some point in advance. And so they will walk in or enter into these things very guarded, very much, trying to sort of be careful and keep themselves protected ahead of time. And this is often why a dismissive avoidant attachment style is so difficult to get close to, because they've got a lot of stored emotional associations that perceive closeness in relationships as being painful or threatening to some degree. And so this is, a really important thing to be aware of. So emotional neglect often creates also another impact where it's just really hard to let people in, obviously, sort of in alignment with some of the other earlier things I mentioned. And also, there's usually a major serious repression of this individual's feelings. So they are like usually generally extremely disconnected from their feelings. They can go both ways on their needs. They can be sort of in tune with their needs when they're like primary needs, like needs to sort of withdraw or go back to their comfort zone or things like that. But when it comes to their moment-to-moment needs or day-to-day needs, those little, fluctuations or changes within our needs at different times, our needs from other people in relationships, these are generally like unknowns. So they tend to not really understand what their feelings are in real time at all, like really, really minimally. And definitely, not their needs from other individuals, and usually not their own personal needs until they become extreme. So, how do we go about changing this? This is something I really want to focus on, is what to do when we've gone through emotional neglect. So, number one, we need to start tracking our feelings. It's so important to be in touch with your emotions. Your emotions do so much for you. They're guiding you towards, what the right situation is for you. They're guiding you towards what feels correct, what feels incorrect, right or wrong for you specifically. They are guiding you towards when you're feeling upset or hurt by something and have a need, or it's sort of time to communicate that thing. Your feelings are a huge, huge player in your boundaries. If you don't really know what your feelings are in real time, you're almost completely disconnected from your boundaries, unless, again, like these are really extreme happenings, because our feelings are showing us like, okay, look, this doesn't feel good. And when we don't feel good about something, that's the time to set a boundary. So without being attached and connected to our feelings in real time, we have a really hard time sort of navigating ourselves in the world and not getting caught up in things we don't want to be in, or saying yes to things that we mean no toward, we feel a no towards, or, just ending up in situations where we're confused or lost or unclear. So it's really important to reconnect to your feelings. And this can be a really scary thing at first, because, again, your feelings as a dismissive avoidant were made to feel extremely unsafe for prolonged periods of time. You've associated your own emotions with another layer of emotion that's like rejection, pain, threat, emotional abandonment, dismissal, neglect. All these feelings are stored above a layer of what your deeper internal emotions are that are communicating things to you in real time. So it's really important to start tracking your feelings, get in touch with them. You'll be so much clearer on how to navigate your way through life if you're doing this. And a really good way of starting this is like just Google list of emotions, or visit www.personaldevelopmentschool.com, and like we'll have a list of emotions on there, and start tracking your emotions. We've got a list of emotions, and you can pick the major ones first. Like, you don't have to, wake up and check in with yourself and be like, oh, I feel, a little bit alone this morning, and I feel, a little bit confused and a little bit lost, and I feel a small form of abandonment. You don't have to get into like the depths and the details right away. You can start off with the major feelings, like afraid, happy, sad, angry, like just major feelings, but check in. So this has to be something that's done in a pattern and through repetition, because the subconscious mind is programmed through repetition plus emotion. So we really need to be repetitively doing this in order to actually reassociate ourselves to our feelings. So what you want to do essentially is, set an alarm on your phone for every 4 or 5 hours. Have either the emotions list up on your phone or have it printed off somewhere that's available to you. And just check in, that alarm goes off. Okay, what am I feeling right now? And just connect to those feelings, get in touch with them. Ask yourself where you're feeling them in your body, because emotions are basically, feelings are basically sensations we're experiencing in our body. And so, you might feel sadness in your throat or in your sinuses. You might feel anger in your chest or your arms. You might feel fear in your gut. You might feel happiness all throughout your torso and your head. And these are generally the places that will experience those emotions. And so check in, like, and what you're doing as well is you're reconnecting, you're kind of reassociating to your body, because a lot of dismissive avoidants are so emotionally repressed that they're a little bit dissociated from themselves to a certain degree. So you really want to practice that active reconnection to your feelings and to feeling those sensations in your body, being present with your body. So this is super important. The next thing you want to do is start asking yourself what your needs are. And, I've done this work with a lot of people and given them like a list of needs so that they can sort of reconnect to themselves and reassociate. But somebody actually said this to me, and it was a really great reframing of this because he was really struggling with his needs. And he said, what's helped me is to ask myself the question that says, what do I need to feel better right now, or to feel happy right now, or to feel safe right now? So instead of just saying, what are your needs right now? Because I think a lot of dismissive avoidance kind of come up thinking, I don't know, like this is something that's such an unknown to me. So what you can do is you can ask yourself, what are my needs to feel good right now, or happy right now, or whatever sort of form of that question you want to phrase it as it feels like a good fit for you. And what you're doing is you're sort of directing the question more specifically, and it's usually much easier to find an answer that way. And again, if you Google a list of needs, or we're going to have a list of needs up on the Personal Development School website ASAP, you can just go through there and you can connect to those and take a look and what things here are important to me. And usually for the dismissive avoidant, it'll be safety, security, support, space, acceptance, sort of these kinds of needs. But again, go and look through the entire thing and find out what's specific for you. And the next thing that's really important is you need to start practicing active self-connection. So much of what happens when we are emotionally neglected is we take the exact same patterns that we were given in childhood, and we're just rerunning those patterns on ourselves now. And this goes for everybody across basically all patterns, unless we're going through some serious, massive changes in our life, or some kind of self-work or introspection. So usually what's happened, and you can see this clearly from what's been illustrated thus far, is that you were emotionally neglected in childhood, or if you're watching this because of somebody you care about, that person was emotionally neglected in childhood, and they learned to neglect their own emotions, right? Same thing. You just keep repeating the pattern because this is what you have been trained, and your nervous system has been conditioned to know and be comfortable with. And you know what? It's worked because we're surviving thus far. And so, your subconscious, which is, quite survival oriented, is like, okay, this is good. We're just going to hold on to this and keep recreating this pattern. So what you need to do is stop neglecting yourself emotionally, which you'll do through connecting to your feelings, accessing your needs, and also through just active rituals of self-connection. And this can be like, bubble baths. This can be journaling is such an important one because you're actually putting your thoughts on paper, your feelings on paper. Through self-connection questions. I have an amazing set of habits for success with 40 self-connection questions where you'll get to know yourself and things you can ask yourself on a daily basis to make sure you're actively embracing self-connection. And we'll have that also on the Personal Development School website. So connect to yourself, ask yourself these questions, get to know yourself. You can't properly love somebody you don't know. It doesn't, you might have a relationship to yourself that's sort of on autopilot all the time, but if you don't actually actively get to know yourself, it's going to be really difficult for you to love and care for yourself effectively. So it's really important to do that as well. The last two things are speak up and be heard. A lot of dismissive avoidants feel like they're not being heard. They're not feeling that it's safe to be vulnerable. So practice that vulnerability and talk. Allow yourself to build new associations to what closeness is, and practice. Start in small steps with people that you think you can really trust, and share a little bit about yourself. And then notice how good it feels to actually see somebody hear what you have to say, listen, be present. So choose people that you trust, that you can see will connect with you, and share little bits over time consistently. And what you'll see is that you start to break down those internal walls and boundaries and fears, and you start to build new associations, seeing that you can connect to people and it is in fact safe and you won't in fact be rejected. And the more specific and explicit you are about how you communicate your needs to that person, hey, I'm going to share something with you right now. It's a little bit vulnerable for me, but I would really like you to hold space for me right now. Or just, you don't have to give me any advice. I just want you to listen. The more explicit you are, the better chance you have at really building those positive associations, because you feel empowered in your vulnerability. And of course, you increase your chances of actually getting those needs met because you're communicating clearly what they are. And the last thing is start validating yourself. A lot of dismissive avoidants have a deep wound around invalidation. And so from that emotional neglect, you want to start actively creating patterns, reprogramming patterns where you sit down with a pen and paper and, write a list of 10 things every morning or every evening. Just make sure it's habitual, because that's how we reprogram our subconscious mind and these patterns and programs that are running. write a list of 10 things that are working for you right now, that you're doing well right now, that you're accomplishing, that, where you're building momentum towards, or, how you're getting things done, or you're moving towards your goals. And it doesn't matter if you're in a stuck place where you're not actively getting everything met that you need to. But what does really matter is that you start teaching and training your brain to develop a new way of seeing things and actually validating yourself. And if you start running that program, you actually build some more self-esteem and self-confidence, and you will also feel safer connecting to people that way. So those are some initial tips and tools. Thank you so much for watching. If you got a lot of good stuff out of this video, please visit www.personaldevelopmentschool.com to find out more. And please like our channel, subscribe, and share any videos that you find valuable. Thank you so much.